if you're worried about your own
I'm
account.
learning. I'm
Okay.
worried about my own account because I get taken down easy. I said abortion last time,
Okay.
and
Just
they
say S
booted me.
word. Just say
Okay,
S word.
okay, S word. So I want to ask you like, what do you mean by S word? Because I think it's a really intuition pumped word, and it can mean different things depending on how you define it.
I think it just means the causing of your own death intentionally.
Um, because I feel like you wouldn't if you said, okay, this person sacrificed themselves for me, right? They like jumped in front of a bullet, right, and saved my life. It wouldn't. I feel like the word or the S word has like some connotations that just wouldn't make it appropriate for the situation. You know?
Okay. So first of all, you're a Christian.
Yeah, yeah. And but
Okay.
I do want to say, I just want to specify, I've talked to you before. I don't know if you remember, this was a while back, but I'm not too keen on defending Christianity. I just more wanted to talk about the Jesus stuff
No
in
worries. No,
specific.
yeah, I'm not. Don't worry. I'm just chilling. So you're okay. So do we agree that what death means on Christianity is this when the soul separates from the body? So when your dies, when your soul separates from your body, is that an appropriate definition of dying or being
You
killed?
you could you could say that.
Okay, well, that's the sense of killing or dying that we're going to use. Okay.
Sure.
Um, all right. Suppose there was a child that walked out on the road, okay, and you pushed him out of the way, knowing that you will die. Okay, you're right. I would not consider that suicide. Okay.
Okay.
Now the question is, did you intentionally cause your death by stepping out into the road and saving the child?
Well, yeah. I mean, if you define the S word as just like intentionally causing your own death, then yeah, it's the S word. But I just think it's not appropriate to call
Okay.
it that.
What caused your death? The car or you or both?
Well, it's a matter of both.
Okay. Now, did you want the car to separate your soul from your body?
Well, it wasn't preferable, right?
Okay, it
Necessarily,
wasn't preferable.
right?
So
But like it was.
if you had the power to make it such that you could like be Superman, right? And step out, save the child, get hit by the car, but no, but the soul is not separated from the body. If you had that power, um, would you would you enact that power insofar as you wouldn't die in that case?
Well, if it wasn't necessary for me to die in that case, then I would enact it in such a way for where I wouldn't.
Okay, so but the point is that as we are now, we're stipulating based on our normal human biologies that if we step out in front of a car going 45 miles an hour and we get hit and we save the child, we will die. All right? We're not in a position of power to prevent that.
Okay.
So far, so good?
Yeah, but I already know the direction you're going to take this. You're going to say God is omnipotent and He should be in a position to where He should change it.
Okay, let's let's develop it a little bit more. We might be missing premises, we might not be.
Okay.
So suppose Jesus does the same thing as you. Okay? The difference, you're right. The difference is that when the car hits me, it's not up to me whether my soul is separated from my body, right? I'm not.
Sure.
Okay, in that moment, I'm not in control of whether I die. Okay? Whereas when Jesus steps out in front of the car to save the child, he is in control. The car is not like going to force his soul out if he doesn't want it. Okay? He has to let it happen. He has to basically intentionally separate his soul from his body because the car doesn't have power over that
Okay.
that being. So if you're in Jesus' position and you step out in front of the car and your soul is separate and Jesus' soul is separated from his body, seems like he intentionally caused that.
Well, the intention would still be there, like regardless.
Yeah, but in our case, we don't. in our case, it's not up to us. The reason why it's not suicide is because it wasn't up to us at the moment when the car collides with our body. It's not up to us.
So are you saying it
Whether
wasn't? Are you saying that he essentially wasn't necessary for him to do it? He chose to.
Well, yeah, but then the question of necessity, yeah, basically, right? Like the idea is that the option to yeah, he had the power. It's not like when the Romans stabbed him or nailed him to the cross that they were forcing his soul out of his body.
Well, here's the thing. I think you're forgetting that God is omniscient, right? And I think you're kind of presupposing that he wouldn't have some sufficient reason, right, with his all-knowingness to where it is required, right? It's a necessary for the goal that he wants to achieve.
Okay, you mean logically necessary?
Well, if he has a certain goal in mind that he wants to achieve, then that's the means in which he feels that's gonna be the best way. I would say it's a matter of necessity because he'd probably choose the best possible.
But what kind of necessity? Logical necessity?
Not too sure, but it could be a logical necessity. Yeah, probably logical necessity.
Okay, that means that if we were to say that Jesus did not die at that moment, okay, or at any point, right, there would be a contradiction.
Yeah, and you could say that, but obviously this supposes that if he had a reason, right, for doing it, and then like, right, obviously the reason was for some greater goal, right, and then like that was the only way in which to achieve that particular goal.
Only way is a synonym for necessary.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. So like,
Okay.
there's like, so he has a particular goal, right, and then there's like only one way in which like he has to go about doing it to best achieve what he wants to achieve. You know?
Right. So what I'm trying to say is that you've got to derive a contradiction from him saying that, or from him choosing not achieving his goals and choosing not to die on the cross, right, at any point.
Well, I actually disagree. I don't think you can even make the statement that, he's committed suicide, because then you'd have to presuppose, that he didn't have some intention, his necessary intention.
Wait. I think we took a few steps back. We agreed that Jesus did cause his death, but it was necessary, and that's what doesn't make it. Doesn't make it suicide, right?
Wait, are you granting necessity? Because
no, that's what I'm contesting.
Okay.
Yeah, the thing is that if it's logically necessary, there's going to be a contradiction in saying that God achieves his goals but doesn't ever die on the cross.
Yeah, I'm more saying like I'm not stating that it's necessary. I'm saying that it more like epistemically, since I don't know, like it could be necessary. And so for you to make like a definite claim with like finite knowledge, right, about what God's possible intentions is when he has like an infinite number of possible, intentionalities, it seems really arrogant to me.
Okay, when you say in logic, if something's possibly necessary, that just means it's necessary. And when you
No.
there's no difference
It's
between
not
the
a
two
modal.
statements.
Hold on, my bad. Let me clarify. I don't mean a modal possibility. I mean an epistemic possibility. As in, like, I don't know, therefore it could be.
It could be what?
It could be necessary, but not in like a modal sense. Like, I'm not saying, oh, there's a possible world. I'm saying like an epistemic, right? I don't know whether it's necessary or not, right? But if it's necessary, right, there would be a contradiction then.
Yeah, I have to think about that. So you're saying that epistemic possibility doesn't, if it's epistemically possible that it's logically necessary, okay, that doesn't entail that therefore it's logically necessary.
Yeah, because you're not making a definite claim about a possible world.
I'm not making a claim?
No, I'm not. I'm not making, like, when you invoke an epistemic possibility, you're just saying, like, I don't know, therefore it's possible. Like, for example, if your mom comes home and then she's like, oh, did your dad go to the store? Right, and all you know that he left, right, you could be like, oh, it's possible. You don't mean like in a possible world, it's more like an epistemic possibility. Like, I don't know where dad went.
Do you think
so
it could possibly be unnecessary?
In an epistemic sense, yeah.
Okay, so you don't know whether...
I don't know. I'm saying I don't know, and I'm saying you don't know.
Yeah, but then that means you don't know if Jesus committed suicide. He could have.
Well, if the claim right here is that you're saying he committed suicide, then I don't think you can even suffice the proposition.
Okay, well, I'll grant you that, but then what this commits you to is saying that you don't know if Jesus committed suicide.
Well, I don't necessarily know.
Right. You just don't, disagree.
Well, I guess you could say I don't necessarily disagree.
You don't disagree, man. You just got to think about it, or maybe there's something for you to discover to where he is or he's not.
Yeah, I here's the thing, right? I just think it's a little bit much to be like, oh, well, I think Jesus did this, and then like you're just like think of it, you're just like a drop in the ocean compared to like the amount of knowledge God has in comparison to you.
Wait, okay, but just to clarify, you don't disagree with me yet.
Yeah, but I don't. It kind of seems like one of those like. It's hard to falsify religions, especially when you're dealing with somebody like who's all powerful, all knowing, you know, certain things. Because you could be like, oh, well, there's a contradiction with God's action, and I could be like, oh, well, there could be a sufficient reason for why God does this. You don't necessarily know that, you know?
Yeah. Okay. So I'm fine with saying that because there's two senses of maybe perhaps even three senses. I'm not so sure. There's at least two senses of suicide that we're working with. One is if someone committed suicide, they caused their own death. Okay? I think in that definition, Jesus committed suicide. There's the other sense of suicide, which kind of tracks the way that we use the term a little bit more often, it seems like, where someone causes their own death unjustifiably or unnecessarily.
Oh, my bad. Could you repeat the last one? I completely blacked
That
out.
someone caused their own death unnecessarily.
Okay, yeah. Yeah.
Okay. He did commit suicide in the first sense. Jesus did cause his death.
In,
Okay.
in that sense, but I don't think it's appropriate to.
Yeah,
to
in the
label it
other
like that.
sense, you don't know.
You said the second sense?
Yeah, you don't know.
The second sense being like I don't know whether it's necessary or not.
You don't know if he committed suicide in the second sense.
Well, I'm asking what's the second sense? I don't think I heard you.
That you cause your own death unnecessarily.
Well, if you grant, it almost seems that like he can't do that though. Like,
But from you appeal to epistemic possibility, right? You said it's epistemically possible that it's necessary. If that seems to entail that it's epistemically possible, for all you know, it could be unnecessary.
yeah, I don't necessarily know in the sense of like infallible knowledge. Like I don't.
Yeah, Amder, I'm sorry. Intent is in both cases. I left that out. That's right, Amder. Intentionality is in both cases. When you're sacrificed, you're intentionally. You could say there's a sense in which you intentionally unalive yourself, but it's like for a good reason or it's necessary or something. Yeah. Anyways, it seems like on your view, even on the second sense of suicide, you don't know. For all you know, Jesus committed suicide.
Well, if we say that the Christian God is real, then the second sense wouldn't. I don't think it'd be possible.
Okay, but now you're making a different, because I thought you said it's possible that it's necessary.
Epistemically.
Yeah, it's epistemically possible that it's necessary. Is it epistemically possible that it's not necessary?
Yes, epistemically. And if we define knowledge as
Okay,
knowing
so
necessarily.
then you just don't take a position.
Well, no. There's difference between infallible knowledge and infallible knowledge. Like we have
Look.
JTB that's fallible, and then we have like infallibilism.
Wait, what's going on? If I said, for all I know, because this is epistemic possibility in a nutshell, right? For all I know, there's someone on the other side of the world making $1 million. But for all I know, maybe there's not such an event.
Well,
okay.
Hold on. But the reason why I'm positing an epistemic possibility is because I don't know out of necessity. It's not my knowledge. Like I don't know necessarily whether this thing is true or false, but I think I have good reason to believe one of the other sides.
Okay. Are you making the claim that it's necessary for God to crucify himself?
Because if I say yes, then you're gonna be like, oh, derive the contradiction. Well, it seems like would you say that like if he did it unnecessarily, would that contradict God's nature in your eyes?
It seems like it would. This is a kind of dilemma.
Isn't that the contradiction itself though? Like if we grant the Christian God is true, then he could necessarily not do that since it derives a contradiction.
Okay, so you're saying that you have to stipulate that Jesus is God, so he must have a reason for everything that he does.
Well, I'm saying we're going under the axiom that the Christian God is true, right? Like for the
Yeah.
hypothetical.
Okay, so you're saying, okay, then I think that would have been better than that whole epistemic possibility stuff. Okay, you're saying there is given. It's sort of like this. You're saying that if God were to tell you that there's a contradiction in some statement that you didn't understand, you'd believe that there's a contradiction in that statement, even though you don't even know the statement, and let alone derive the contradiction. Is that kind of what's going on?
You said if God told me there was a contradiction in a statement and I
Yeah,
didn't
so
know the
I'm
statement.
liking it. Look, because we stipulate that God is a truth teller. He always tells the truth. So if this God told you that there's some statement that in another language, let's say, that there's a contradiction, you couldn't derive the contradiction from that statement in another language, but you would know that there's a contradiction in the statement.
Yeah, that would give you good reason to believe that there's a contradiction.
Right. So that's kind of what's going on, is that if suicide is defined in terms of okay, but now, okay, yeah, I think that might work. You're gonna have to say in the second sense, then, yeah, Jesus couldn't be committing suicide, right? Is that, yeah? I don't know
If
why I
you
would look down
grant
that.
okay, if you grant that the Christian God is true, and then you grant that the unnecessary unaliving of himself contradicts his nature, then necessarily he cannot do that.
Yeah, I'm fine with that, but that's, of course, that's stipulating that you don't know why it's necessary.
True, but I don't think anybody claims that they know everything about God.
Well, I'm not. So, yeah, I'm fine with that response. I think I'm fine with that response.
Okay. I can grant the first sense. I probably wouldn't agree with the second sense, and then the third sense was like.
But I want to stipulate something,
Okay.
that you don't know why it was necessary for Jesus to die on the cross.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of things I don't know about God.
You don't know why he died on the cross.
Oh wait, oh my bad. Is that what you said? I meant like, yeah, it was obviously for our sins. At least that's what he told us. So
Okay, could he forgive our sins without dying on the cross?
that seems like a different discussion, though.
No, that's the same discussion, right? Because when you're saying, okay, at first, the way that I see this, and sorry, this is a new topic for me, so I'm kind of like thinking about it myself.
No problem.
Okay, so the way I see it is that you said earlier that it's necessary, but you don't really know why, and specifically that there's a contradiction entailed from God not dying on the cross, or Jesus not dying on the cross, right?
Yeah. So I think this, which you're asking right now, would tie into the last thing. Like, it would have to be necessarily that he died for our sins as well.
Okay, but when we're talking about God and we're talking about necessary, we can only be talking about logical necessity.
Of course.
Okay.
Unless it's like a colloquial necessity, like, oh, we need oxygen to breathe. But yeah, go ahead.
Okay, so I guess it's gonna. Okay, this is. Okay, I have to organize my thoughts.
No
so
problem.
you have the end goal, which is to forgive the sins of the world, right? And what you're saying is logically necessary for Jesus to die on the cross for that end. But you've got the two statements. You can now, you know the meanings of the terms. You could see whether it's contradictory or not.
Not really, because you don't have the all knowledge. Like, let's say
Okay,
let's say like you provide an alternative for what God could have done. Right? There could be some
okay,
knowledge outside of
let's
your
say
grasp.
I'd say something like this. If someone said it was logically necessary for me to drive to the store to buy onions. Okay? What do you think they would be right?
Okay, look, I don't think that's quite analogous.
Okay, fine. Let's say it's not analogous. I want to think through it. So, if someone were to claim that it's logically necessary for someone to drive to the store to buy onions, would they be right?
Well, it would depend. Like, what are they basing, the claim off of.
You think it's logically... Wait, presumably they could have walked there.
But if they drove there, and then you make a
But
statement
it's not
about
logically
like,
necessary. I chose that example because it's an example where we can agree that wherever you could drive to, you could walk to.
well, I don't like using like physical actions and like logic interchangeably because I personally don't believe the laws of logic, laws of physics are necessary. I think those things are
Wait, so
non-logical.
it's not even physically necessary.
No, I can grant that. Sure.
Okay, would you agree with the person that says it's logically necessary for me to drive to the store rather than walk to the store to get to buy onions? Would you agree with them?
Well, that statement in a vacuum, no.
Okay. Now, if God tells you there is a contradiction, it's logically necessary, what would you think?
That's a whole other like thing. I'm gonna be like immediately, right? The ways in which I understand something's possible, right, isn't necessarily infallible, right? And when you're talking about someone who is omniscient, right, they're gonna
Wait, I
have
just wanted to look. If God tells you, actually, Makima, you were wrong. It was logically necessary that for that person to drive to the store to buy onions. What would you say
wait,
to God?
hold
Would
on.
you what would you how would you revise your views?
Yes, if the God is truthful and he's omniscient, yes, I would
Okay,
100% provide my.
okay, let's move on. If God told you that it's logically impossible for shapes to have four sides, what would you believe?
Shapes that have four sides,
Yeah.
um, then I would be like, okay, it just seems like God's defining shape in a different way.
That's sorry. That's a bad example. I think that's a bad example.
Okay.
Let me repeat this. It's logically necessary for trees to have green leaves. Would you believe him?
Well, yeah, because our perception of colors isn't infallible. Like I know
So,
what you're trying to do. You're trying to like be like all these oh, would you believe this absurd claim if God told you to do? But like if you granting he's a truthful and omniscient God, I think it'd be so unreasonable to just deny that.
yeah, but you do draw a line before you say the person that's telling you, it's just wrong. But if God is defined as someone that never says anything illogical, but I guess how do you know that there's any how do you know that there's any lack of contradiction in a set of statements?
Well, it depends on what you're evaluating in particular.
Okay, so for instance, can these two statements be simultaneously true? Um, Joe Biden is signing paperwork, and there is an avalanche in Colorado. Can those be simultaneously true? Those two propositions, P and Q.
Yeah, it seems to be the case that those things can both be true. But I
Okay,
don't necessarily know. That's when I would draw the line.
you don't necessarily know
Yeah.
whether those two statements are contradictory.
Yeah, there could be some fact of the matter about the situation in which like this thing actually entails a contradiction and then like God could know that.
Yeah, I think there's a deeper issue that I'm not really prepared to talk about, but it seems like if you know the meanings of the terms, if you've grasped the concepts, okay, that you would just you would know in some kind of very like I mean, it seems like you would know. Like if I would claim that I know that um that my table could be okay. I guess like from a set of axioms and logic and whatnot, right? Like classical logic, whatever. That sort of tells me what is possible and what is contradictory, right? And if there's some proposition P, and I know that P does not imply not Q. Like, so do I know that the proposition there's an avalanche in Colorado does not imply Joe Biden is not signing paperwork? Can you know that?
Well, I think you can stipulate your knowledge, but as soon as you have if like it's like this, right? It's like it's yourself and you have God next to you, right? And then you're trying to figure out a situation. And then you
We'll come back
say,
to that
"Well,
in a
this
second. Look,
seems
I'm
to
asking. do you think you could be wrong and presumably you and I agree. Let's start with agreement. There's an avalanche in Colorado. Does that in any way imply the proposition Joe Biden is not signing paperwork?
It doesn't seem like it to me, but like I said, a seeming isn't necessary.
For all you know, the statement "there's an avalanche in Colorado" could imply Joe Biden is not signing paperwork.
It should be, if we have a claim of God saying that, these two things can't exist simultaneously.
Forget about God, man. Forget about God for a second.
But it's analogous to include God. You can't talk about it in a vacuum.
I'm just talking about epistemology and how we know whether there's.
You can say I know this, but it would be knowledge as in JTB, which is fallible knowledge. It's not necessary.
Wait, JTB, if you have that sense of knowledge, it's going to necessarily, if you have that knowledge, it's true.
No, it's a Gettier. The Gettier case exists. You can think you have JTB.
Oh, you're just projecting knowledge then? Is that what's going on?
No, I'm saying it's not necessary. I grant JTB, but I don't grant the necessity of JTB.
What does that have to do with anything?
Well, it has to do with everything, because just because you can say, "Oh, I've justified true belief, I know this," doesn't mean that you can't be wrong about it.
The point is that even those that are sensitive to Gettier cases, if you know it, it's true. People that accept Gettier cases, that reject JTB will agree. Necessarily, if you have JTB, it's true.
Yeah, you can say that, okay, I have JTB, it's true, but you're establishing truth through a fallible means. Like, JTB doesn't necessarily derive the conclusion.
I don't see what this has to. So let's start over. Okay, I'm just going to show the absurdity of this.
Okay.
Can you derive my name is Makima. That's my TikTok name is Makima. That's you believe that, right?
Yeah.
Can you infer from that you're not that you are a serial killer? Could you possibly infer from that statement, "My name is Makima," to "I'm a serial killer"?
Yeah, there could be possibly. There could be some unknown implication from me naming myself Makima. Okay, 2 + 2 = 4.
Can you infer from that you're a serial killer?
I can't conceive of an instance where I could do that.
Amder, I don't know how to deal with this. Could you let me see what Amder has to say about this, because he probably has something in mind but there is something here that I think you're missing. Amder, I invited you, man. Anyways, yeah, it seems like you have you know the concepts that you grasp, right? Or you requested, Amder? Okay. Maybe talk to Amder. He's probably better at this than I am here.
Sure. I gotta go soon, but yeah.
No problem. My connection might be a long time for that invite to come through. But I don't know. The knowledge stuff was really weird, but that might be like a little bit off topic to go into.
Yeah, we don't need to talk about that.
But it seems like, I think we take like an optimistic view towards claims about logical possibility. And what I mean by that is that we like act on the presumption that things are logically possible until some contradiction is shown. So like I could ask you, is it like contradictory for me to walk across my kitchen and open up my refrigerator? It'd be really weird to say, well, you should just be like agnostic about whether or not it's possible for you to do that. It's like, no, I can just stand up.
I'm not saying that.
I can just walk over to my refrigerator and I can open it.
Can I clarify?
Well, what are you saying? Yeah.
Yeah, so I'm saying that use your typical way of gathering knowledge. But if it were the case that an omniscient God were to put that into question, I think you should consider what he's saying.
No, like in the case that
the thing is, this is like the very thing that we're looking at. This is that Jesus would die in such a way in the story is the explanation. and we're looking at whether or not it's like more expected on the hypothesis there is this omniscient being, or like at least I think that's what we're doing.
Yeah, but if we're granting Christianity, okay, then okay, so now there's a question of whether, okay, we've established that God did intentionally cause his death. Now we're wondering whether he did that, whether it was logically necessary. And he's saying that given God's nature, it must be logically necessary, but he doesn't know the contradiction.
But that's only the case if you say that not doing it is a contradiction to his nature.
You're not saying it's like a contradiction in that the statement God like killed himself, that there's some contradiction you can derive from that. You're saying that there's some part of God nature that contradicts.
No, he's saying, well, I don't know. This is what I said. I said this, that God is. This is basically saying, well, what if God said that the statement has no contradiction, that bears a contradiction? What if God were to say that?
Well, I might ask God like what the contradiction is. But.
Okay, but what if he doesn't tell you? Or do you think that based on the kind of God that they believe in, that would be committed to saying that the statement is contradictory, but we wouldn't derive the contradiction?
Well, unless it's like a dialetheist God, like, because their God is the God that, if he said something, it's true, right? That's like stipulated.
Let's rule that out. We're not going all that, yeah.
Yeah, so then it would be a contradiction for the statement that God told me was contradictory to not be contradictory. So it must be contradictory then, because stipulated that the God is like always telling the truth.
Yeah, because he wants to say that when he looks at a statement, it only seems to him that it's not contradictory. And so if God, however, were to tell him, or we stipulated as God were to tell him that it's contradictory, his seeming, well, look, his seemings could be misleading, and so there is a contradiction in the statement. He just doesn't know it.
Yeah, I mean, that seems weird to me because I think you can actually show if a contradiction, if like a statement is contradictory. At least it seems like you can. If it's a compound proposition, you can just break it down into atomic propositions, like put it on a truth table and see if you have any P or not P there.
Well, that's going to be the statements in a vacuum. Like if it were the case that there was some knowledge outside of your grasp, then you wouldn't actually be able to accurately derive a contradiction.
So what I'm saying is that for God, so this is what I'm saying. I think the dialectic is confused here, because if you're stipulating that God's telling me something's a contradiction, and God stipulated is all truthful, what he tells me is a proposition or is a contradiction. It is in fact a contradiction. But like what the proposition in question here, that God hasn't told you, that's not a contradiction, has he?
Well, if it's the case that if one of you guys are stipulating that him doing it for no reason is a contradiction to his nature, then it doesn't even have to be said by God. It would just be the case that if he exists, he can't go against his nature. Therefore, he wouldn't.
I think the idea is that God has a goal. Let's say the forgiveness of sins. He has a means of doing that, and that means is logically necessary. It's logically necessary to accomplish that goal. He would have to die on Earth at some point or sacrifice
But
himself.
it's only going to be logically necessary if you grant.
If you grant the kind of God you have in mind.
No. It's only going to be logically necessary if you grant that essentially him not doing this thing or him doing this for no reason goes against his nature, right? You're then immediately going to say, well, if he exists, then he can't do that.
Well, wait. So why is it? So like it's God. So salvation's like part of God's plan. That part's necessary. Why is it necessitated by his nature that he does it in that way, where like his son dies?
What? Wait. You're asking me why does him wanting to achieve salvation, and why does his like nature necessitate him achieving salvation in that particular way?
No, I'm granting that his nature necessitates him achieving salvation, But why does his nature necessitate that salvation is achieved that way, through like killing himself?
Well, I can just say I don't know. But if you grant if you grant that he exists, and necessarily would be the case that would be the case, and I wouldn't even have to tell you
No.
why.
Wait. Why wouldn't it be that it would if all you're stipulating is that like God has the desire for salvation, then all you're getting is that there's some plan of salvation, not that there wasn't like not that it was necessitated that it had to be this way. Maybe there was like two options, and both of those options got the same conclusion. They both got salvation. They were equally preferable, and he just like went with the one where he killed himself. Like,
Well,
how have you ruled that out?
I think so what I'm gonna say is, if there's a contradiction with him choosing a particular option, then he cannot choose that option necessarily. If it doesn't go against his nature, right? Him choosing among those options, then it's perfectly fine. If you're saying that him choosing among equal, preferably, outcomes, right, entails like a contradiction to his nature, then he can't do that.
This is how I'm understanding your argument, or like the strongest form of your argument, is that necessarily God achieves his end. God's end is for salvation. Necessarily, God achieves his ends in the best way, or the way he has the most reason to do. And so what I'm asking is how we've ruled out the idea, because in order to get from there to it's logically, given God exists, it's logically necessary that he killed himself on the cross in this way. Seems like you've ruled out that there's like any other option that he has the same reason to do, that gets the same end and doesn't involve him killing himself. And I don't know how we've ruled out that area of the possibilities.
He can have multiple options on the same playing field, as long as it doesn't contradict his nature. If you're gonna then say that he has multiple options, right, and him choosing from those equal options now contradicts his nature, then I'm just gonna say that there's no options.
Oh, but that's not what I'm saying, because it sounds like there, under this account I just gave, we haven't ruled that out, and that's possible. Then him killing himself, like, now it meet that definition Danny laid out for suicide.
Wait, pause,
and it's not logically
I don't want to
impossible.
I don't want to cut you off, but like,
Yeah.
Is him doing it for no reason contradictory to his nature?
I didn't say it was for no reason.
I'm just asking.
I assume that would be against his nature, given that he wants to like achieve his ends in the way he has the best reason to. I'm assuming this is entailed by all goodness.
From there, any option, right? If God exists, any option that would contradict his nature is no longer an option for God.
Yeah, it's not It's a contradiction of his nature to do that. It's not him doing it. Is not a logical contradiction. It's just a contradiction.
No, the contradiction of your nature is a logical contradiction.
Only if all you like. Okay, I don't know if I want to get into it here, but there's two different ways to understand that, and it's only going to be a logical contradiction under one of them. But either way, what I'm saying before is that if you are agreeing that it's possible that there's options that God has the same amount of reasons to do, we haven't ruled this out, then God could have an option to achieve salvation that doesn't involve killing himself, that's not for no reason, it's not irrational for him to do, and then he still chose the option to kill himself, and that's not a logical impossibility for him to do it some other way.
Okay, so I think my point's getting to you. So if it's the case that the options, right, contradict his nature, then it won't be the case that those are actually options that God can choose, right?
Can you like steel man what I'm saying here, maybe?